In this emotional tribute, we take you through the final days of one of the most legendary figures in professional wrestling, Hulk Hogan. From his iconic rise in WWE to the heartbreaking final chapter, this video honors the legacy of a true American icon. Whether you grew up chanting "Whatcha gonna do, brother?" or admired his larger-than-life persona, this video gives fans an intimate glimpse into Hogan's last days, filled with reflection, legacy, and unforgettable memories. The Florida sun cast a golden haze over Clearwater Beach, but inside the Hogan estate, the air was heavy, not with heat, but with history. On that final week, silence had crept into the once lively hallways that had echoed with laughter, with stories, with the echoes of a life larger than any arena could ever contain. Terry Bollea, known to the world as Hulk Hogan, wasn't the superhero anymore. He wasn't flexing in front of sold-out crowds or tearing t-shirts with primal roars. He was just a man. A man grappling with the ticking of time, with the limits of a body that had given everything to entertain millions, and with the knowledge that his final curtain call was approaching. Hogan's final days weren't filled with the spectacle he had once defined. There were no pyrotechnics, no leg drops from the top rope, no screaming fans in red and yellow. There was a hospital room. A recliner near a window that overlooked the Florida coastline. And a steady stream of visitors, family, old friends, fellow wrestlers, and those who had shared the ring with him, broken bread with him, bled beside him. But even in that quiet room, the presence of Hulkamania lingered like the scent of worn leather boots and sweat-stained bandanas. It wasn't just a place of mourning, it was a place of reverence. A temple to a man who had embodied an era. Those closest to Hogan say that the last weeks were when the real Terry shone through. There was no bravado left to maintain, no character to perform. The man behind the mustache, the one who had lived through glory and scandal, triumph and injury, was reflective, calm, and surprisingly gentle. His voice, once a booming battle cry in the squared circle, had softened. Each word seemed weighed, chosen. He spoke not of regrets, but of lessons. He didn't count championship belts, he counted faces, people, moments. In those final hours, it wasn't Hulk Hogan the icon who mattered, it was the relationships Terry had forged across decades. There were long conversations with his son, Nick, who sat by his father's side day and night, often holding his hand when the pain in his back flared up. That back, the same one that had lifted Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, had endured more than a dozen surgeries. Now it betrayed him with spasms and stiffness, forcing Hogan to shift uncomfortably in bed. But he refused to complain. "That's the price of immortality, brother," he joked weakly one morning, eyes twinkling with the last remnants of showmanship. Brooke, his daughter, brought photographs, albums from the 80s, candid Polaroids from behind the scenes, grainy videos of family barbecues and beach days. Hogan's eyes lingered the longest on one from 1987, him hoisting a young Brooke onto his shoulder in the middle of a crowd. He stared at it, smiled, and whispered, "I hope I gave them good memories." There were phone calls, too. Some private, some emotional. Vince McMahon was said to have broken down when he called. "You built the empire, Terry," Vince reportedly said, voice cracking. "Without Hulkamania, there's no WrestleMania." Hogan didn't answer for several seconds. Then he sighed and replied, "We built it together, brother. You gave me the platform. I just tore the roof off." The call ended in silence, two titans recognizing that their legacies would forever be intertwined. Others came in person. Ric Flair, wearing a somber black jacket, entered quietly and stayed for hours. No words at first. Just two men, once rivals in every sense, sitting in quiet companionship. Eventually, Flair leaned forward and muttered, "They'll never know what we gave, what we lost." Hogan nodded. "They won't have to. We already gave it." It was a moment that spoke volumes. The bravado of the Nature Boy and the Immortal One had faded, revealing the brotherhood beneath the gimmicks. These weren't characters anymore. They were men bound by pain, sacrifice, and legacy. Randy Orton came by, respectful and quiet. John Cena left a note. He couldn't make it in time, but his words were handwritten. "You were the reason I ever believed I could do this. Thank you for the torch." I carried it because you lit the way. The Rock called from a movie set and wept on the phone. Triple H, now a steward of the WWE Kingdom, sat for over an hour, promising Hogan that his name would never fade, that the kids coming through NXT still ended every promo class with one of his catchphrases, but the most emotional visit came from a man who had spent years estranged from Hogan, his longtime tag partner and friend, Brutus the Barber Beefcake. Their friendship had once been legendary, then shattered by time and distance. But when Brutus entered that room, Hogan's eyes filled with tears. "I never stopped loving you, brother," he whispered. Brutus nodded, grabbed Hogan's hand, and said, "Let's not waste another second pretending we're enemies." And they didn't. They talked until Hogan drifted off to sleep, their bond mended by time and mortality. Physically, Hogan was deteriorating quickly. Years of wrestling had left him with broken bones, nerve damage, chronic pain, and a weakened immune system. He'd had artificial joints, fused vertebrae, and experimental stem cell treatments just to keep walking. Toward the end, even that became difficult. Nurses had to assist him into bed, adjust his position, monitor the swelling in his legs. But what stood out to everyone who entered that room was his spirit. "He didn't want us to cry," one of his longtime assistants recalled. "He wanted us to remember the good. He wanted us to laugh. And he still cracked jokes, between breaths, between winces, he'd say something hilarious. He didn't lose that spark." There was one moment, in his final 48 hours, when Hogan reportedly looked out the window and asked a simple question: "Did I matter?" His nurse, unaware of the weight that question carried, answered gently, "You mattered to millions." Hogan shook his head and said, "No, not Hulk Hogan. Terry. Did I matter?" And the answer came in waves. Outside the hospital, hundreds had gathered. Fans from every generation, dressed in yellow and red, chanting Hogan. Hogan, just as they had in the Silverdome. Signs reading, "Thank you for my childhood" and "You made me believe in heroes" were held high. People didn't just remember his matches, they remembered what they felt when he appeared. Hope. Power. Possibility. Inside, a chaplain arrived and offered Hogan a final blessing. He accepted it with quiet gratitude. He asked for music, surprisingly, not his entrance theme, but "Eye of the Tiger," the song that had carried him through the earliest days of Hulkamania. He asked that it be played low, just loud enough to hear. "It always reminded me I was fighting for something," he said. "Even if it was just the belief that I was unbreakable." His last conversation with his children was private, but those close to the family say he told them he was proud, not for how they lived in the spotlight, but for how they lived when no one was watching. "Be better than me," he said. Not louder, not stronger, just better. He held their hands for a long time, even when the strength in his own was gone, and then, one night, as the stars hung still over Clearwater, and the breeze rolled gently in from the Gulf, Hulk Hogan, Terry Bollea, took his final breath. It was peaceful. No fanfare. Just a man, surrounded by love, slipping into history. But outside, as word spread, the world reacted like the arena lights had dimmed forever. WWE immediately issued a statement. Vince McMahon ordered a 10-bell salute. Wrestlers across all promotions, from WWE to AEW to NJPW, posted tributes. The timeline was flooded with memories, pictures, old promos, and footage of a man who, for a time, made people believe in superheroes. Social media wept. Fans who had grown up watching Hogan tear through the likes of Iron Sheik, Macho Man, and Ultimate Warrior now shared their own stories, of meeting him at signings, watching him with their dads, imitating his poses in their living rooms. And perhaps that was Hogan's true legacy. Not just the titles. Not just the moments. But the memories he helped build between fathers and sons, between brothers, between kids who needed something to believe in. Hulk Hogan wasn't perfect. His life had been marked by triumph and scandal, adoration and controversy. But in the end, what endured was the truth that he gave all he had to entertain. That he inspired a generation of wrestlers and millions of fans. That for a moment in time, when the lights hit the ring and the crowd chanted his name, the world felt invincible. The day after his passing, WWE aired a special tribute episode. The logo turned black and white. The show opened with a slow montage of Hogan's most iconic moments, him pointing to the sky, cupping his hand to his ear, the ripped tank top, the leg drop heard around the world. Commentary was muted. The music playing wasn't his usual bombastic entrance theme, but a piano rendition, soft and aching. For once, the roar of the crowd was replaced by something deeper, reverence. Superstars lined the stage, heads bowed, eyes wet. Roman Reigns, once a child watching Hogan from the crowd, stood motionless. Even Paul Heyman, known for his scathing words, had nothing but silence. Triple H delivered a tribute in the ring that night, not as the Game, but as Paul Levesque. "We all wanted to be Hogan," he said, voice catching. "We all wanted to be larger than life. But Terry taught us that the real strength isn't in the flex or the finish. It's in the fight to keep going. It's in showing up, even when it hurts. It's in giving yourself to the people, night after night, year after year, until there's nothing left but legacy." Over the next few days, tributes poured in from every corner of the wrestling world and beyond. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson posted a video at dawn from a beach in Hawaii, looking straight into the camera. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Terry was my hero before I knew what wrestling was. He didn't just open the door for us, he tore the whole damn wall down. And he never stopped believing in me. I love you, brother. Thank you for everything." Stone Cold Steve Austin, usually stoic, shared a rare candid photo of him and Hogan sharing a beer, captioned simply, "For the guy who made us all believe in the impossible. Cheers, Hulkster." Even celebrities outside wrestling mourned. Sylvester Stallone, who had worked with Hogan on Rocky III, released a statement. "Terry wasn't just a champion in the ring, he was a warrior in life. He fought his demons, stood tall in storms, and kept going when most would have folded. We lost a gladiator." The news cycles paused for Hogan. Even the toughest critics, those who had once scorned his past missteps or questioned his relevance, softened. In that week, the world remembered why he mattered, not because he was perfect, but because he was human wrapped in myth. A man who carried his flaws with the same pride as his victories. The ultimate face of an era. A memorial was planned at the WWE Hall of Fame venue in Stamford, Connecticut. It wasn't televised, not in full. But those who attended said it was unlike anything they'd ever witnessed. Undertaker, in full black suit and gloves, stood by the casket for hours, not as a character, but as a man grieving a peer. Bret Hart, who had once feuded fiercely with Hogan both in and out of kayfabe, gave a speech that silenced the room. "We didn't always agree," he said. "But Terry loved this business. He bled for it. We all did. But he bled first." Fans gathered outside the venue, holding candles, replica belts, and vintage Hulkamania shirts. Some were children. Most were men and women now well into their 40s and 50s, the kids who'd once begged their parents for action figures and pay-per-views, now crying like they'd lost a family member. Because in some way, they had. Hogan wasn't just a wrestler to them, he was a memory of a simpler time. Of belief. Of invincibility. His funeral, held in Clearwater a few days later, was attended by an intimate mix of family and close friends, with a few cameras kept at a respectful distance. Linda, his ex-wife, attended with quiet dignity. Nick and Brooke gave heartfelt eulogies. Brooke sang softly, an acoustic rendition of Amazing Grace that left not a single dry eye. Behind them stood a montage of Hogan's life, not just from the ring, but from his quiet moments. Playing the piano. Laughing at a barbecue. Holding his grandchild. Kissing a rescued dog. The Hulkster had always been seen as a titan. But here, in death, he was mourned as a man. After the service, Nick Bolia shared a message to fans on social media. "My dad wasn't perfect. But he never claimed to be. He gave his body, his soul, and his heart to you all. If you cheered him, if you booed him, if you wore red and yellow or made fun of it, he loved you. You were his reason to fight every day. Thank you for loving him back. Back at WWE headquarters, a permanent exhibit was installed in his honor. A recreation of his locker room. The original boots from WrestleMania 3. The very first prototype of the Winged Eagle Championship belt. His torn shirt from his first WrestleMania. Letters from fans who said he helped them survive bullies, divorces, cancer, war. Hulk Hogan wasn't just a character. He was a symbol. And in his passing, that symbol only grew larger. As the weeks passed, tributes evolved. AEW dedicated an entire segment to his memory. A rare collaboration with WWE allowed footage to be shared across platforms. At WrestleMania, a holographic image of Hogan stood in the center of the ring as the crowd erupted into chants of "Thank you, Hogan." Fireworks lit the sky, not in celebration, but in honor. A 10-bell salute. A final "Whatcha gonna do" echoed across the stadium screens. And then, silence, but the silence wasn't empty. It was sacred. A silence reserved for icons. For men whose shadows stretched beyond the squared circle and into the hearts of millions. Hogan's last match had been years before. But his final battle wasn't in a ring, it was in a hospital room, facing the inevitable with grace, humor, and courage. And in that fight, he won again, because death didn't erase Hulk Hogan. It immortalized him, and in locker rooms across the world, in backyard wrestling mats, in toy aisles and posters and chants and dreams, the legend lives on. When a young boy ties a bandana around his head and flexes in the mirror. When a father introduces his son to wrestling with a grainy VHS tape from the 80s. When a crowd chants you, and cups their hands to their ears. Hulk Hogan lives not as a man, but as a memory. As a myth. As a movement somewhere in the heart of Florida, not far from the coast where Hogan once trained under the blistering sun, a mural began to appear on a crumbling brick wall. It was painted by a local artist who'd grown up idolizing the Immortal One. In slow, deliberate strokes, the mural captured Hogan in mid-pose, bandana blowing, arms flexed, eyes focused not on the enemy across the ring, but toward the crowd. Behind him, the American flag waved, not for patriotism, but for passion. Below the image were 4 simple words: "Heroes never die, brother." The city didn't commission it. They didn't need to. The community rallied around it, adding flowers, candles, and messages from generations of fans. Some notes were simple: "Thank you, Hulk." Others carried the weight of decades: "You helped me believe I was strong, even when no one else did." The wrestling world didn't move on. It evolved. And at the center of that evolution was Hogan's spirit. WWE introduced the Hogan Cup, a yearly event dedicated to showcasing rising stars who embody the spirit of Hulkamania, courage, charisma, and connection with the fans. The first winner, a young NXT graduate named Duke Cross, stood in the ring and openly wept. "I never met him," Duke said, voice shaking. "But every time I step into this ring, I feel like I'm borrowing his strength." The crowd erupted. Not because they were seeing the next Hogan, but because they saw how deeply Hogan still lived in the hearts of the next generation. At WrestleMania 42, just months after his passing, a statue was unveiled outside SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. Bronze and nearly 12 feet tall, it depicted Hogan in his most iconic pose, tearing his shirt apart, muscles carved like mythology, with a grin that dared the world to believe in magic again. Vince McMahon, now older, grayer, more solemn, stood beside it and said, "This is not just a monument to a wrestler. It's a monument to an era, to belief, to a man who gave his life to give us all something to cheer for." But the most moving tribute came not from the company, not from a wrestler, but from a fan. Her name was Lisa, a schoolteacher from Iowa who had written to Hogan decades ago when she was 10 and struggling with leukemia. In her letter, she'd said she watched Hogan matches to escape the pain of chemotherapy. Months later, Hogan visited her in the hospital, unannounced, unexpected. He sat by her bed, signed her cast, and told her, "You're stronger than me, sister." She survived. She became a teacher. And in the days after his death, she shared the story publicly for the first time. He didn't need cameras. He didn't need applause. He came for me. I don't remember the pain anymore. I remember the leg drop and the smile and the way he made me feel like the strongest person in the world. Those stories multiplied. A father wrote that Hogan gave him the courage to leave an abusive household. A veteran said Hogan's matches kept him sane during nights in Kandahar. A young man battling depression shared that Hogan's voice, booming, ridiculous, joyful, made him laugh when he hadn't laughed in weeks. In death, Hulk Hogan reminded the world why he mattered in life. He wasn't just entertainment. He was escape. He was empowerment. In interviews after his passing, legends reflected on the duality of Hogan, the man and the myth. Ric Flair admitted, through tears, we had our differences. But when it came down to it, there was nobody, who could electrify a crowd like Terry. He was the sun, and we all orbited around him. Shawn Michaels, often the iconoclast, simply said, we stood on his shoulders, whether we liked it or not. And Steve Austin, sitting in his Texas ranch, held a beer and said into the camera, rest easy, big man. You were the one that started the fire. We just kept it burnin'. Even wrestlers who had never shared a ring with Hogan paid tribute. Cody Rhodes dedicated a match to him, writing HH on his boots. Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, tweeted a rare message, respect to the one who paved the road. Rest well, brother. Bianca Belair, a rising star, told ESPN, he made it possible for us to dream bigger. To think this sport could be more than just fighting, it could be storytelling, it could be magic. In the weeks that followed, fans gathered in watch parties around the world. Hogan matches were streamed like sacred texts. Families sat together, parents pointing at the screen, children wide-eyed, as the red and yellow Titan came to life once again. They watched the body slams, the big boots, the unstoppable comeback sequences where the more you hit him, the stronger he got. And they chanted along, sometimes in tears, sometimes laughing, what ya gonna do when Hulkamania runs wild on you? The answer, now, is simple, you remember. You celebrate. You carry it forward, but Hogan's absence was still felt. Wrestlers returning to backstage segments instinctively looked for him, expecting his unmistakable laugh, his oversized presence, his advice that often ended with just make the crowd feel it, brother. Hall of Famers visiting the Performance Center caught themselves turning corners as if he'd be there. For decades, Hogan had been a fixture, not just in wrestling, but in the very fabric of what it meant to perform, to fight, to be seen. His death left a silence that even the loudest arena couldn't fill. In private, his family grieved with the same mixture of loss and gratitude. Nick Bolia admitted in an interview, we shared good times, bad times, public battles, and quiet hugs. But at the end, I got to say goodbye. And that's something not everyone gets. Brooke, his daughter, wrote a song in his honor. It wasn't released to the public, not yet, but a snippet leaked. Just a piano and her soft voice singing, you were the light when I couldn't see, the roar that made me brave. And though you're gone, I still believe, in everything you gave. There's talk now of a biopic. Studios are circling, actors auditioning. But insiders say Hogan's family is taking their time. He wanted it done right, one source said. Not flashy. Not fake. He wanted people to know the truth behind the man in the bandana. Because Hogan's final wish wasn't to be remembered for his wins. It was to be remembered honestly. In his final journal entry, one now framed in his home gym, Hogan wrote, in uneven pen strokes, some people saw a gimmick. Others saw God. I was just a kid from Tampa who wanted to be strong enough to protect the people I loved. Maybe I went too far. Maybe I got lost sometimes. But every time I stood in that ring and looked out at the crowd, I felt like I mattered. Thank you for making me feel that way. I hope I made you feel it too. If I did, then I did my job. He did, and so, the legacy of Hulk Hogan didn't end with his passing, it began again. Not in the headlines or the trending hashtags, but in the lives of those he touched. In every gym where a teenager grunts through one last rep, dreaming of one day walking that aisle under the bright lights. In every kid who still runs through the house in a makeshift bandana, striking a pose in the mirror. In the grown adults who, after a long day, sit on the couch, put on an old WrestleMania tape, and for a moment, just a moment, become a kid again. Hogan's influence extended far beyond the WWE universe. In fitness circles, he remained a symbol of old-school strength and charisma. Gyms across the U.S. organized tribute lifts, bench presses in sets of 24, honoring his iconic 24-inch pythons. Nutritionists, old-school trainers, even bodybuilding icons paid their respects. Arnold Schwarzenegger posted an old photo of the two side by side, arms flexed, grinning ear to ear. "You were a force, Hulk," he wrote. "On the screen and in life. I'll miss your strength. I'll miss your heart." At Comic-Cons and pop culture expos, Hogan's presence lingered. Cosplayers still donned the yellow and red. Merch booths sold out of vintage gear. Fans carried hand-drawn posters reading "Forever Hulkamania" and "Immortal, even in death." Panels were dedicated to his legacy, not just in wrestling but in entertainment as a whole. After all, Hulk Hogan wasn't just a wrestler. He was a movie star, a TV personality, a household name. Thunder in Paradise, Suburban Commando, Mr. Nanny, films that might have been cheesy, but were unforgettable for a generation. For many, Hogan was the first bridge between wrestling and Hollywood, long before The Rock or Cena walked that path. But beyond the flash and spectacle, the real tribute to Hogan came from the community. Fans gathered for candlelight vigils across major cities: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, Toronto, London, Sydney. In Tokyo, a tribute aired on New Japan Pro Wrestling's broadcast, with Japanese wrestlers bowing in silence for a man who had once brought American wrestling into their culture. In Nigeria, fans organized a local wrestling event in his memory. In Brazil, graffiti artists painted his image on the side of a favela boxing gym. From South Africa to Canada, India to Ireland, Hulkamania proved what it always was: global. And yet, in the quiet moments, it was the man behind the legend who haunted people the most. Not the booming voice. Not the exaggerated tan. But Terry, the father, the friend, the flawed human being who tried, stumbled, got back up, and kept going. His pastor, who had known him for years, described their final conversation as one of peace. "Terry was ready," he said. "He wasn't afraid. He believed in God, in redemption, and in love. He told me, if I've hurt people, I hope they forgive me. But I never stopped trying to be better. Even in the end." WWE Studios announced they were developing a multi-part documentary titled Immortal, The Final Bell of Hulk Hogan. It would follow his final years, including unseen footage, personal interviews, and archived phone calls. The production team, made up of Emmy winners and longtime wrestling journalists, said they wanted to tell the truth, not just the victories, but the wounds. Not just Hulk Hogan, but Terry Bollea. "This isn't about glorifying the gimmick," the lead producer said. "It's about understanding the man beneath the bandana." In his hometown of Augusta, Georgia, where he spent part of his early years, a small park was renamed in his honor, Hogan's Way. A bronze plaque stood beside a tree planted by school children, reading, "He fought in rings, on screens, and in hearts. The man may be gone. The spirit lives forever." Children now played beneath that tree, unaware that decades earlier, a boy named Terry once dreamed of being strong enough to change the world. But in Clearwater, where he spent most of his final years, the memory was everywhere. His favorite diner kept his table reserved for a week, placing a single yellow rose beside a plate of French toast, the order he always made, with extra syrup. Locals recounted how he would tip generously, offer advice to struggling kids, and never turn down a photo, no matter how tired he was. "He remembered everyone's name," one waitress said. "Even if you only met him once." And in the wrestling schools he supported, his name became part of every lesson. Trainers echoed his philosophies, not just about showmanship, but about heart. "The crowd doesn't care how many moves you know," Hogan had once said to a class. "They care about how you make them feel. Make 'em feel something, and you'll be remembered forever." His words were now etched onto the wall above the main ring in the WWE Performance Center. Meanwhile, online communities continued to share memories. Old promos. Fan art. Video tributes. Some were funny, parodies, edits, memes. But most were sincere. One viral video featured a montage of Hogan's greatest moments set to a rendition of Hallelujah. The top comment read, "He wasn't just my childhood. He was the first person who ever made me believe."